All right, hi. Today we're going to be going over Emiliano Zapata, a influential Latin American revolutionary figure in Mexico. We're going to be comparing two books, in which we compare how the author talks about his life differently and how he is influential in different ways. So the first thing we need to talk about when talking about Zapata is the revolution. And we can't talk about the revolution without talking about the president at the time, Porfirio Diaz. He was the president of Mexico from 1884 to 1911. The general idea behind Diaz was that people didn't like him very much for multiple reasons. The first and main reason being that he promised democracy, but it never came. He constantly promised elections and just never would hold them, or he would rig them. Another big issue behind Diaz is that he never offered any land reform. People in the land wanted land reform because, first of all, there was many foreign investors in Mexico who owned very many lands, like mines and farms and such, that the Mexican people didn't have. And the land that the Mexican people did have was in the form of haciendas, and these were large farms that the wealthy owned. So going on to the next point, we're going to talk about how Diaz met his end, and we get to that by talking about Francisco Madero. He ran against Diaz in the first open election in 1910. Diaz promised that he would hold an open election in 1910 where he rigged the election to where he couldn't lose. Even though Madero had the obvious majority, I mean, it was just obvious that he was winning. So he lost in a rigged election. And after this election, he called for a rebellion against Diaz, and which eventually ousted Diaz. And here you can see a picture of Madero. So we got to talk about the two major ideologies of the revolution. The first being the institutional revolution, and the people who backed the institutional revolution wanted to make a change in government. These were people like lawyers and doctors in the upper echelon of Mexican society that wanted to hold a public office. And now that Diaz was out of the picture, they could now do that. And this was their main set, was to just revolutionize the government mainly. The second main point of the revolution is the popular revolution. And the popular revolution, people wanted to make a social change. They wanted to bring more equality to the people in poverty, and this would come through the land reform, which I've previously spoke on. Land reform just wanted to give it back to the poor people, pretty much. The people who backed this was the common man, the poor people of Mexico mainly, and this is where we get to Zapata, really. Zapata was a obvious supporter of the popular revolution, one of the main leaders of the popular revolution. He held a small army, if that's what you want to call it, named the Zapatistas. The Zapatistas would go to haciendas and take control of these haciendas by force, usually by either throwing out the hacienda owner if they was lucky, or killing them. And they would control the hacienda, distribute it amongst the people, and then they'd do this hacienda to hacienda. He also would later rebel against other presidents who wasn't offering land reform in a timely enough fashion. So that's really his legacy. So now we're going to go on to the books that we are going to compare for this. The first being The Posthumous Career of Emiliano Zapata, Myth, Memory, in Mexico's 20th Century. This book focuses on the myth that Zapata created. The myth being how he was this like Robin Hood style figure, and how he would go to these haciendas and out these evil, corrupt landowners and even kill them for their injustices. And they do this hacienda to hacienda. The book really goes into how this could be viewed in a negative light, how people could see Zapata as a renegade, someone who's a murderer, so to speak, like, because he did kill these people, right? So not everybody saw that as a positive thing. The main issue the book focuses on here is a local versus national view of this. The local being the people from southern Mexico, the poor people from this area would view him as a national hero, someone who was to the beneficiary. And the national ideology of this was that, maybe he was kind of a murderer. He did kill these people. Maybe he should just let the government do his job. So, like, these two sides, it really focuses on these two sides of the myth and the memory of Zapata. And finally, the thing it addresses is the death of Zapata, how this, like, shaped his legacy. And we will go into greater detail about the death of Zapata at the end. But it goes into the great detail of the death and how it shaped his legacy and how it made it look better for him in the end. The other book we're going to compare is Emiliano Zapata, Revolution and Betrayal in Mexico. This one focused more on him as a political figure, how he changed the political spectrum in Mexico, how he really was for the land reform, the popular revolution, and how he really drove that home. Another portion of this book gave a really extensive background on his beginnings, where he grew up, his family life, the village he lived in, so on and so forth. And it also gave a great in-depth to Zapata's human side. It showed him in a light where he cared about people and was for the people, and how he cared about it. So it showed him as a human, somebody, just another person, as it were. So as we previously mentioned, the death of Zapata was important. It shaped his legacy as a whole. So I'll briefly go over his death in a very brief manner. Essentially, long story short, he was tricked into a meeting where he was tragically gunned down in a hailstorm of bullets. And this tragic death spread across Mexico. So his death in 1919 really marked a new chapter, so to speak, in the revolution, saying that it marked the end of the military phase, meaning that the fighting was over and it was more about laws and stuff along those lines. So how did this affect his legacy? Well, at this point, he would have not been going to eat hacienda, killing people, and not being as much as a renegade at this point. So it would show him in a light more positive, in a way that was more friendly to Mexicans in general, in a more positive light. So that's why history and people in general usually remember him in a positive light. He get the haciendas back to the little guy. The important things here. Then at the very end here, I'm going to go over some of these works that I've used here. The two books, as you can see here, was by Samuel Brunk. I used the same author here because I thought it was very interesting to see how his writing styles in both these books differed. It was very interesting reading how in one he favored one thing and the other favored something else. It was miraculous, I thought. There's another book here, the Mexican Revolution, A Short History. Just basic overview of the Mexican Revolution. Let's see, Texas Rangers, the Mexican Revolution, American-based things, conflict and consolidation, just other works here. I think there's one more that's very good I liked here. Yeah, labor and the prevalent revolutionaries. This is the labor force in Mexico and all that good stuff. Yes, so this was it. I appreciate it. Thank you.